Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of TEPSA Presents. I'm your host, Todd Neslony, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership here at the Texas Elementary Principals and Supervisors Association. We are thrilled to bring you these TEPSA Presents conversations every 2 weeks. You can check out all of our past episodes on our podcast, TEPSA Talk, or on our YouTube channel or on Facebook. You can also go to our website, tepsa.org, and right there under the publication side, there are a link to everything. Our podcast, these TEPSA Presents, everything is on tepsa.org. But I'm not here to talk about what we've done in the past because today, a brand new conversation about bridging the gap. And we have invited my friend Kris Fuller on with me. Kris, thank you for being here. Tell everybody who you are.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. TEPSA, thanks for having me. My name is Kris Fuller. I'm currently the Chief Education Officer at GF Educators, which we produce the Step Up to the TEKS series of books. We also recently released TEKSnology.com, which is trying to take both the videos and assessment items and put them online to make it easier in this time to use. But we've been doing building products for Texas teachers for 30 years. We had the Step Up to the TOS series of books, Step Up to the TAC series of books, Step Up to the TEKS series of books now. We have about 4 or 5 different books for each grade level, whether it's Power Review, whether it's an assessment book, or whether it's a practice book, a TEKStivity book. So our focus is on developing products built around the Texas standards for Texas teachers and Texas students. That's all we do is focus on Texas products. And we've done it, like I said, for 30 years since the TABS test back in the mid-'80s. So that was a long time ago. Went from
You said the TOS, and it brought back memories because that's the test I took in high school. So, and then I've been teaching through the TEKS, and through the other ones. And so it's so funny to hear you mention some of those old names again. Well, today's conversation, Kris, is all about bridging the gap. Because if there's one thing we keep hearing again and again is that kids are going to have gaps this year. What kind of gaps are they going to have? How do we close gaps between moving from one grade level to the next? Or if they have to change teachers or going in person to virtual or whatever, the conversation just keeps coming up again and again. And I know you've been hearing some of that as well, right?
Yes, I have. I'm currently working on my doctorate. And so I've been doing some internships in some classrooms and looking at some planning and listening to teachers kind of talk about this. Now, gaps have always been there. We've always had this issue of gaps. It's not like it's a brand new issue. What's happening though is it's just being magnified at this point. And so, when I go into those planning sessions and listen to them, they talk about these great lessons that they've done in the past and building up this lesson and then they start looking at the standard and start going, okay, well then how do we have time to do all this and how do we do this and that? And and then they start looking at the standard and going, oh, okay, well, this is what that standard says. And I think one thing that we've got to do and got to understand is, standards have been around now since, the mid-'80s is when they were, the early 90s when they were first introduced. And they've become, I think with these last standards, everybody's talking about specificity, vertical alignment. And those are very important issues. And so what I've noticed is that teachers are kind of trying to look at what they've done in the past or look at stuff they've taught, and they're trying to do everything still. Mm-hmm. And then when you bring that focus back to, okay, let's look at what the standards have done, because as TA has updated these standards, they've really added this specificity, this vertical alignment to make it a developmental pathway. In the past, when you're teaching, the standards were really very vague.
Yeah.
It was hard to determine, okay, what am I supposed to teach at 3rd grade? What am I supposed to teach at 4th grade? What am I supposed to teach at 5th grade? And so it's just very hard to really dig into them and go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to teach. When I talk to teachers a lot, we talk about, well, back in the day, with the TAKS test, how did you know what you're supposed to teach? And they go, oh, well, they wouldn't say anything. And then they'd finally go, okay, well, I'd wait till release test came out and go, oh, that's what I'm supposed to teach. And
You know,
another
but
year later,
you're exactly right there, because I remember when I was teaching, it was like, well, here's a general idea of a standard. And so we got to teach this, but then we got to see all the questions of ways they've asked in the past, because that's what we really got to do. But then when they released the new standards, it was like so specific that I think a lot of teachers who had been teaching in previous iterations, it was really hard for a lot of us to break out of that, because we were like, well, no, I've been teaching it like this. Well, now the state was really specific and said, you don't need to do it like that. It needs to be done. And it took a lot of brain shifting to understand, wow, I can't just kind of look at past questions and just do whatever I want. I got to really see the wording and what it says and how that alignment looks too.
I think the other key that what you just said also is how that alignment looks. Because if you look in elementary, let's take elementary math, for example. One of the big aspects of elementary math is building that operational fluency. Can they multiply, divide, add, subtract with fluency? And I was working with some teachers the other day, and we were talking about this, and they were like, "Oh, I've got to teach this, and I got to teach this," and we said, "Okay, let's take a step back and look at how fluency is built up in our TEKS and our standards from 3rd to 4th to 5th grade, and then look at kind of what your responsibility is." And fluency is not even mentioned until you get to 5th grade. And so when they began to kind of sit back and go, oh, wait, okay, in 3rd grade, I'm focused on models, and I'm focused on introducing these strategies, and I'm focused on automaticity 10 by 10. And I think that's part of when we talk about bridging these gaps. That's so important for the teacher to understand is, look, we're all in this together. And if you'll kind of focus on your piece is there for a reason. You don't have to teach the fluency in 3rd grade. Now, some of your kids will be fluent, and that's great. But our goal as teachers is to make sure they all get there. And that's what's so important, is that we've got to make sure all of our kids get there, not just the ones who get it in the first 5 minutes. And so the way the standards are set up now is it's really a 3-year process to get to that fluency. And it's a model, and then go to representations, and then strategies. And then finally, once you've built up that conceptual understanding with those pieces, you get to the algorithms. Yeah. And I think in the past, we've always been such a hurry to get to that algorithm part that conceptual understanding piece has been skipped over.
Well, hey, you think about the way any of us learn. That's how we all learn. That's why we want to do it like that, because it's like, well, I learned it that way. That's the way. And it was a big shift with all, because you're speaking to my math teacher heart here, because that's what I was. So I'm listening to you going, I remember that training, moving to models. I remember how hard it was and the complaints from parents. It makes sense when you look at the research behind it and when you look at how you're scaffolding things. But it is a hard shift. And like I said, you're speaking to my teacher heart here, but I'm thinking at the same time, I'm listening also as a principal and going, okay, I get what you're saying. I'm hearing a lot of this for teachers, but I'm the principal or the assistant principal. How am I going to help bridge the gaps? What can I do to help my teachers?
Well, speaking of those observations, I had the opportunity to sit through an observation of the day that a principal invited me into, and it was the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th grade math teachers actually all in the same planning. And I think giving teachers the opportunity to plan and look at what's happening at other grade levels is just as important. I know a lot of times we focus on just meeting with your grade level teachers, but the conversations that those teachers were able to have because they were able to meet with, I think this one's actually 2nd grade through 6th grade. And listen to those teachers go, oh, you teach that in that grade? Oh, okay, well, how do I support you? How am I set up to support you to get them there? And it was just neat listening to those conversations, because I don't think they had necessarily had a lot of them before. And it's them beginning to see, that big picture where we're so, teachers are so focused on, here's what I'm teaching right now. I think as principals, we have to give them those opportunities to see that bigger picture and to begin to put, it's just like we talked a minute ago about building up operational fluency with multiplication. And we talked about that conceptual piece of it. Teachers need the conceptual piece as well. And I think us as principals, what we need to do is we need to put them in those positions to be able to build those conceptual understanding of how these standards are put together, so they can see that, look, if I focus on models and I focus on building those beginning strategies and automaticity to 10 in third grade, I've set that foundation really, really, really well for that fourth grade teacher, because I know she's going to build on those. Yeah. And that fourth grade teacher can do the same thing. She goes, oh, this is where they're coming from. This is where their foundation is set. And I think us as principals need to be able to, or principals need to give the opportunities to teachers so they can really see that bigger picture, because so many times, you know, and you're a teacher, I was a teacher. Mm-hmm. When school starts for the year, it's a train and it isn't stopping.
Well, you know, but you said something there that really brought up a memory and also resonated with me. And, you know, my first thought is, you know, when I hear something like that, I'm like, when are we going to find the time? And I'm reminded of doing this and seeing that this solves so many problems, having those vertical meetings, because I remember teaching in Waller, and I was at an elementary that was pre-K 5. And then the junior high was 6 through 8. And I remember they made all of us 5th grade teachers meet with the 6th grade teachers. We didn't even work on the same campuses. And they said, we just want 5th grade to show how they're doing their math and their reading and science skills. And we're going to have grade teachers be there to provide input. That was by far the most powerful moment for me, to hear those 6th grade teachers say, that's not really how that TEK goes, because in 6th grade, they're going to have to do this, this, and this. And if you don't set this foundation here and stop using those tricks and everything that we've used before, you're going to mess them up in 6th grade. And I was like, I had never even thought to go and talk to other grade level teachers. I was so busy and I just thought I never had the time. But when the district or my principal forced us to do it, it was huge. And I was so grateful after that. So part of it is just making the time to do it. And so, you know, thinking about Step Up to TEKS, how can that help? What kind of resources do you provide there?
Well, we provide several. You know, one of them is we do trainings where we come in, we talk to the teachers and, you know, help them understand and better understand those standards. Then we also have various products, whether it's practice books that really focus on those specifics for the TEKS. But as part of that, it also shows that vertical alignment. You know, we have actually a product in front of me. I don't know if I can bring this up, but it's this, where we have the TEK broken out, then we have the vertical alignment above it as well. So the teacher can just flip to whatever TEK they want to. And here's your TEK. This one's not tested, but then you have it broken out to your verb, your concept, how it's implemented, and then you also have your vertical alignment there. But, you know, being able to see stuff like that is important for that planning process. For the teachers as well. I think a lot of this is making sure the resources the teachers have are focused on those TEKS at that grade level. And that's really where a lot of our specialization comes in, is making sure that we understand these TEKS and how they're put together as well as anybody. So when we do develop stuff, it's really focused, whether it's an activity or whether it's practice, or, you know, whether it's the videos we're putting together for TEKSnology.com, they're really focused on the way our TEKS are put together. You know, if you look, I know your math, but if you look at reading right now, you know, on the old figure 19, you know, all this idea of being able to really look at it from a conceptual standpoint in reading, you know, those TEKS now are almost all worded the same. And really where the complexity comes in is it's an Alexile of the reading. Right. And so you've got to make sure that the passages, the selections you're putting in front of your students, that's determining the complexity now. That's determining how difficult it is. And so that becomes much more important from a reading standpoint now, is to make sure that those passages aren't an 8th grade passage you're giving in 3rd grade, or they're not a 2nd grade passage you're giving in 5th grade. Because the differences in the TEKS, they're worded pretty much the exact same. Mm-hmm. You know, and now those comprehension TEKS, the difference is really based on the selections you're giving them. Yep. From that standpoint. And so, you know, a lot of that is, you know, our understanding of the TEKS and how they've been built since the Essential Elements back in, you know, the mid 90s, putting those into our products and, you know, helping teachers really focus on what's necessary to make their students successful, especially right now.
Yeah.
Because right now we don't have a lot of time for extra fluff or extra aspects. I've got to make sure we keep these kids on track. So when we talked about that layer cake earlier, I can't give them a cake where an entire layer is missing.
Yeah.
Or I can't give them a cake where part of the layer is really thick and the other part is really thin. That messes up all the layers after that. And so I've got to really focus on that layer that I'm responsible for and making sure there aren't any big major holes in there that the rest of the cake falls down into.
Well, you mentioned a new component to your library of tools as well. Tell me more about that, because I'm so intrigued by that.
Okay. So what we did is we took our books and like if you look at our reading books, we have different lessons, and we took each of those lessons and we created some videos based on those lessons. So one video will introduce the topic, and then you'll have some assessment items. Then you'll have another video that really goes into the lesson, and that'll be probably 10 to 12 minutes. And then you'll have a guided practice where we actually take a passage and we walk the kids through each of the questions. And then you'll have assessment items that they do. And so the idea is that, you can use this product, and it goes along with our practice books, whether you're in the classroom or not in the classroom. If you have a bad weather day, hey, you can use this, and it's the same exact lesson. But it also provides that extra reinforcement. And so when whether you're teaching in person right now or whether you're not teaching in person, the number one most important thing for teaching is for learning is having a teacher in there for those kids. I think we've all learned that over the last year.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's also important now for us to be able to use the different multimodal pieces that are now out there. And we all know that students learn in different ways, and they learn from different avenues. And so, just like when we're talking earlier about fluency in math and giving kids different conceptual pathways to get to that algorithm in the end, I think as teachers, we need to be able to give different pathways for those students to kind of grasp on and grab on as well. And I think for principals, a lot of that is making sure that those resources are available, because I know, like, when I'm sitting right now watching these teachers plan, they're like, okay, well, all I have is this. What else do we have? What else can we use? And then they just start grasping, and they're like, I know this isn't the best, but it's all I have right now.
Yeah.
And I think giving them that support because right now teachers are stressed. Everybody's stressed. But making that job and making that planning piece just a little bit easier for them, I think is real important, real vital right now, from a principal standpoint.
Well, there's so many good things that have been brought up today. I know our conversation's called Bridging the Gap, and there's so many ways to look at that. And I love that you have that perspective of planning with teachers right now and talking through that. I love the vertical conversations, how administrators can jump in. And then also, even with all these ideas, there's a product that I can put in my hands to take something off my people's plates.
Right.
That's what I'm always looking for. So what I encourage anybody listening to do is go to stepupteaks.com. The link is also in the comments that you can go to. Go check out what Kris and GF educators have created. There are so many amazing tools, no matter where you fall on the spectrum. I know that little flip book you were sharing, I live and breathed by those as a teacher, but also as a principal. I always had those with me. So because I had so many grade levels I was working with. So Kris, as we leave this conversation today and begin to close it out, what's the big takeaway you want people to know or leave with today?
The big takeaway I want principals to know is that we'll be okay. Kids will be okay. You'll be okay. We'll all be okay. And then, let your teachers focus on those aspects that are most important right now. We talked earlier, and I think, Stephen Covey comes to mind. I know it's been a long time since Stephen Covey, but we're so stuck at what's urgent and what's important, but we still have to find time to do those things that are important, but not necessarily urgent, because that's really where that growth and those gaps are going to be filled now and in the future. So I really appreciate you having me on tonight. I've enjoyed the conversation. Hopefully you have as well.
I have. This was a great one. And that was the perfect little nugget to end on as well. So thank you for joining me, Kris, from everybody here at TEPSA. Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching another one of our TEPSA Presents. Remember, you can check us out every 2 weeks. We have a new episode. We've got them on our podcast, TEPSA Talk, as well as our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. We hope everybody has a great night, is finding ways to get through each day because you're doing a great